Hello, filmmakers and watchers and lovers of, and dreamers and thinkers about film. On today's classic episode of How to Make a Film, Dan and I talk about the shocking, almost angry-making coincidence that we both have plays on stage at this very moment in our dumbly different countries. We discuss the rain and thunder of the horror genre, from jump scares to existential dread, and how films like Skinamarink might inspire you to make your own full-featured film for almost nothing at all. Dan unleashes his vision for a new horror film inspired by the wide shots of John Carpenter's Halloween. And though we do our best to talk about the brand new, controversial Loki episode, the fact remains that I haven't seen it, and though Dan was near it as it lit the room, he can't remember it. My name is Sean Hurley, and I'm a playwright and TV show staff writer, and sitting directly across the woolly, yet sheepless Atlantic Ocean from me, about to make a short horror film consisting only of wide shots for some reason, is Dan Freeman, writer, director, Loki episode lurker, and the veritable John Carpenter of the film in progress, Hold Excalibur.
Let's do it. Let's begin the show, Dan. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well. I'm tired after a week of rehearsals for my play, and I imagine you are. Is yours on now?
No. Yours is going first. I think yours premieres the 1st. Yeah, and then mine is the 10th.
Oh, right.
But I think that's just remarkably strange that we figured out how to get our plays to appear on the earth, yours in England this time, and mine in the United States. Like, we did a good job making that strange thing happen.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Again, I have to I'm a modest guy, as you know, but...
Yes. Immodest? What did you... It sounded like you said immodest accidentally.
It doesn't really matter, does it? Because if I was saying I was immodest, then no. Anyway, the point is, I am wholly responsible for your career as a playwright. So I just want to claim that honor.
That's true. And I dedicated my first... Well, it wasn't really my first play. My first couple plays were one-man shows that I just did by myself, kind of rinky-dink. But after many years of like toiling and other writing things, doing TV shows and stuff like that, it was Dan who said, listen, just write a play. And that was maybe 3 years ago. And I wrote a play called Food and Shelter, and that got performed, and I dedicated it to you.
Yeah, about which I am deeply, deeply grateful. I'm very honored by that. And I am very, very proud of the fact that I am wholly responsible for your playwriting career. You know, like I've got a friend who had a serious operation, Martin Tomlinson, who's an actor, and he had a very serious operation like a good number of years ago. And every time I see him, I say, you owe me. He had a Rip Round donation thing to get this very expensive operation. And I
thought you weren't going to explain it. I thought you were just going to say Martin owes you, but for no real reason, just other than you say it. You just go around telling people they owe you, that you're responsible for X and Y. I did it.
Well, yeah, I do that. I do that. But also, I find that if you're going to tell a story or an anecdote, it's best to start at the end and then do the beginning.
That's good.
So that's what I've done here.
Well, there was a lot of tension.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, anyway, I donated a paltry amount of money to his Whip Round thing. And then every time I see him, I say, you owe me. So what I'm saying is you owe it all to me. But
no, I mean, aside from all that, that was a very necessary, it wasn't really advice. It was more just like a shove and a recommendation. Like, stop focusing on doing this very difficult thing, trying to push TV concepts out into the world, or pilots or treatments, trying to get people to read things to turn them into shows, and just, pull back and do something kind of on your own in private that you want to do, and ignore that clamorous world of Hollywood. And it was very sweet, and I thank you for that. We can't keep being so grateful to you.
Well, I don't think it was that articulate or philosophical. I just thought you'd be good at playwriting, and turned out you were. So, I mean, if you're near Putney in Vermont, is it Vermont?
Yeah. Putney, Vermont.
Yeah, Putney, Vermont. Go and see this play, because I would love to. The play for which I was wholly responsible is beautiful. It's really, really special. And one day I will see one of Sean's plays.
Well, this This one you are not wholly responsible for. So this is my second one.
I am.
Oh, so you're taking credit for this as well?
For the career.
Oh, the whole thing.
Yeah, you wouldn't have written any plays if I hadn't told you.
Okay.
I always think that one of my greatest quality, although I have many, mainly if you're listening, I mean, obviously you're listening to this, but what you can't tell is that I'm a tremendously good-looking man. I mean, I'm a looker. But also, I think I'm good at crewing up because I'm good at appreciating other people's talents.
I think that's a filmmaking skill, a theater skill as well, but being able to see other people's abilities and talents and where they really are able to bring something to a film or a theater product or whatever it is. I don't think everyone can do that. I don't think everyone can see that this person is actually very talented at this or that. You know, it's
I think it's a nice talent. It's one I don't mind boasting about. And I think it's a nice thing to be able to do, to recognize talent in others. And, it gives me a lot of satisfaction. When my play at the moment, I'm working with 3 actors who are relatively unknown. I don't think that's rude to say that. And I'm really pleased that I feel like I was right, because you audition people and then you get them in, and I'm really thrilled at how it's going. I mean, I probably would say that as publicity, but I mean, they routinely make me laugh and they bring stuff to the play that I hadn't envisaged, I couldn't have foreseen. So that's a great pleasure to me. How is yours? How are your rehearsals? Are you at the rehearsals for yours?
I go to them when I can. Putney it's a 2-hour drive for me to get out there and then 2 hours back. So it's kind of far. But when the director wants me to be there, I'm there. So I'm there like once or twice a week, and maybe on the weekends as well.
It's nice that the director wants you there, because a lot of the time I would say directors are quite defensive of having the writers there, aren't they?
I don't know.
Sometimes anyway.
I don't have that experience.
I think underconfident directors.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's probably also a thing where directors could be familiar with that experience and it not being very promising, like having a writer sitting there, and that might just throw the whole thing into a ditch, because the writer might constantly be like, this is not what I wrote, this is not how I imagined it. You know, the sense of complaint that just looms in the possibility of having a writer there.
It depends on the director, though, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think a good director will communicate with the writer and just really try and, be in sympathy with what the piece was intended to be. And a good writer will stay off the set unless they're, or the stage, unless they're asked to be there, because there's got to be one person. Yeah. One captain on the ship, as we
I think
memorably said last week.
With my first play, Food and Shelter, I was at every single rehearsal, and that's because the play itself was very enigmatic and obtuse and sort of hard to track and parse and all that stuff. And so we kind of grappled with it together. But with this one, it's not like that, and so really I'm not needed. I'm more like a stage manager. I help with lines.
Right.
And if there's any kind of wonder about, behavior or what does this mean, I'll answer that, but it's very rare because it's a pretty clear and simple play to a certain extent. I mean, I sort of like the idea of, like, I wouldn't have minded just never going to rehearsal and just coming to the show and seeing it. Maybe it would be a disaster, the worst thing ever, but that would be really just a very fine experience of a thing, that you are part of. But as you're saying, like, your actors are bringing things to their readings that make it maybe funnier in places that you just didn't even know. And that's almost like collaborative writing. They're almost helping you writing in a way by presenting what you've written in their way. I just think the whole theater film writing thing is such a collaborative thing that the text itself, even though it's vitally important, I don't know what percentage of the overall thing it is. It's all of it, but then in the final doneness of it, it feels like it's only like 20%, and the rest of it is sort of everything else around it. I don't know if you find that to be true.
Well, yeah, I think it depends how you do it. I know, is it Martin McDonough who did the Inisherin?
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't sort of deviate at all. He doesn't allow the actors to add anything or change anything. I mean, his work obviously doesn't suffer because of that. But to me, the script is a product of my experience. And if I'm directing as well, then all I've got is my experience. And if somebody comes up with something, you've got a group of actors, all who have loads of experience that they could bring to it, and they might find something better, and often do. And so it seems stupid not to just take that. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. I love getting new stuff like that and seeing it, bringing more to it. And then I get the credit. But I love seeing especially actors, what they come up with, and, if they can improvise or change something or come up with something, they get really they embody the character and then come up with something even better. Then that's miles more gooder, in my opinion.
I almost feel like at the very beginning, you've written something and nobody's done anything with it. The play or the script, the film script, what it is 100% the script. And then by the end of the time when you're performing it on stage, if it's excellent, it's almost like the script has disappeared in its participation. It's like it's left the thing and everybody's taken it over. And I don't know, I almost feel like that's the goal, is for the script to disappear.
I agree.
I almost feel like with Food and Shelter, at the end of it, like that I didn't write it. I felt this strange thing of like, even though I don't think we really pulled it off, I did feel like strangely dissociated from it. Like I didn't have anything to do with that. That just happened.
It's exciting, isn't it, how that happens? But it's almost like security. The first time your child goes and stays away. I mean, my kids didn't care at all. I mean, I was in pieces, and my kids were like, I go and stay away. And it wasn't a big thing to them. And I thought, on reflection, that was a good thing, because they felt completely confident that I'd be here when they came back. And, I think in a way it's like that with a script. If you have a very solid script, a secure island, and you're sure of it, then you can swim far away from that island in the secure knowledge that you've got somewhere to come back to if you need to.
Right.
It's a great blueprint, is what you're doing with a script, and then it's a launch pad for the talents of others.
And so
that's a...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm always trying not to interrupt, and then I interrupt. I don't know what to do about that. Maybe I should raise my hand.
That's what I do in my family. I raise my hand when I want to talk, because they're all...
Really?
Yeah.
Are they all just much quicker than you? And so you're just kind of sitting slowly at the corner and have to raise your hand up?
Yeah, just beaten down.
Yeah. And then when you do have a comment to make to the family, is it just something like, I need a glass of water? Or is it,
yes.
I have a story of the day to tell?
Please let me out. Stuff like that.
Okay. Oh, Dan. So have you been watching anything, seeing anything, had any cinematic or television type experiences that you want to talk about? Yeah,
I had a sort of thought. I watched Loki.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember which episode, but it's the episode that everyone thought was really bad. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and everyone complained about it a lot. And then I realized I hadn't noticed it was really bad, or I didn't think it was really bad. And then I realized I hadn't really watched it. I'd kind of had it on while I was doing something, writing emails or something.
Oh, I see.
And then it occurred to me that I think you probably have to concentrate harder on a bad film or a bad program than a good one, because a good one, it's clear what's going on and sucks you in, and a bad one.
Yeah, maybe that was a clue. Maybe you can't watch bad things. You just ignore them. It's so bad, you just find yourself walking away. And then you think you watched it.
Well, I don't know if it was bad.
Oh, you still don't know?
Well, not everyone else, but, it was a kind of like, there was a bit of a backlash online about it. And but I didn't know it. Anyway, that was my thought. But I watched Ridley Scott's film Legend, the fantasy film.
Oh, the David Bowie long ago?
No, that's Labyrinth.
That's Labyrinth.
And, yeah.
They both begin with L, so I was close.
Actually, the creature effects guy who I'm working with on Hold Excalibur is William Todd Jones, who's a kind of world-renowned master of creature effect, and he did Labyrinth with Jim Henson.
Oh.
And he did all sorts of, I think he stood in for David Bowie and stuff. He did a lot of the creatures and stuff. He worked on Batman with Michael Keaton.
Keaton?
And yeah. Anyway, he's a fascinating guy. He worked on Labyrinth, and he's working on Hold Excalibur as well, which is cool. But
not Legend.
Not Legend. Not Legend has Tom Cruise in it. And I watched it because, again, I was just kind of doing menial tasks. And as it's a fantasy, I thought, I maybe learn something from it. I didn't really expect to learn much, but it's got a lot to it, actually. It particularly opens in a way that I really like. It opens with the credits run over as kind of introduction to the world. So immediately you're in the mythical forest. as soon as the first credit comes up.
Mm.
And then it being a Ridley Scott film, it has quite beautiful environments and little creatures and things. And the tableaus you get at the beginning of the protagonist, sort of running around in this beautiful flowery forest, are quite special. There are huge trees and so on. So it's not great, and it's certainly of its time. And it has Tim Curry, I think, in an enormous devil suit. But it's got quite a lot to it.
I feel like I have absolutely no idea about this movie. Like, it completely missed me as a public object. But I feel like I know all of Ridley Scott and Tom Cruise movies, even Tim Curry. I feel like I have my hands around both of their careers. Not strongly, but enough. Like, I could tell you whether Tom Cruise was in a movie called Legend, which I would say he wasn't before you mentioned it.
Well, I got news for you. He was.
I don't know what happened.
Well,
why do I have this hole of Tom Cruise and Ridley Scott?
I know what you're going to say now.
Should
you watch it? Which is what you always ask me.
Now I can't say it.
Nah, you shouldn't watch it. I don't.
I mean, that's an obvious question. I'm always asking you whether I should watch things. You've come to resent this.
Well, I don't know whether I can't recommend it.
Well, what would you recommend? What's something you would say like someone else should see?
I'll have to think about that now.
You don't like recommending things because you feel like possibly the other person's not going to like it and they're going to hold it against you.
Yeah, maybe I just want to be liked too much.
That's it.
I saw The Empty Man, which is interesting. I think it cost about 16 million to make, which isn't much when you look at it. I think that's correct. And it only grossed 4.
Ooh.
But I found that out afterwards. I watched it, and it's a horror. But it's flawed, but it's not to be dismissed. I think it's got a lot of very interesting and scary images in it. Interestingly, and new scary images that sort of give you that, they're not jump scares, they give you a sort of sense of existential dread. And so I think its flaws are in the script, and it could have been tightened up before it was made. But again, that's easy to say from my point of view, and it's certainly worth seeing, I think.
And you said existential dread. I did watch the trailer. Was there a bunch of kids and they talk about how, you blow into a bottle?
That's right, yeah.
And then the first thing that happens is that he knocks on your door, and the second thing is that you see him, and the third thing is that he comes for you. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you mentioned existential dread, and I almost feel like, when we think about horror films, we think about bad ones, I think, first. I don't know why, but just like Friday the 13th or jump scare type movies. And then we move into something more like The Exorcist. I think when you're immediately given a genre like horror, I think of the worst things first, and then I sort of gradually move into the things that are horror that I really like. But I almost feel like existential dread is the place that horror has kind of been. It's almost its true home, and it sometimes is there. I think The Exorcist kind of has that in it.
Yeah.
But I think of like Ari Aster's recent movies. They are horror films, but they're not really jump scare. They're not really too supernaturally. But it's more about this unfathomable misery that you can't even really point out what it is that you're feeling, during Midsummer or during Hereditary. But it's a real strong, bleak grimness and I feel like horror seems to have matured in the last 5 or 6 years, at least for a time. It'll probably immaturize itself. But there's a lot of very mature, thoughtful horror coming out. And it feels like it's seated in that place of existential dread.
Do you not think the Blair Witch Project was existential?
Yeah, I would say that was there with that too. Yeah. But it also has plenty of jump scares. But I think the reason that people liked it, or it had almost jump scares that you were expecting that didn't happen. You're constantly waiting.
Yeah.
It was a very tense movie. But I do think it tapped into that kind of sense that there's something going on in the world that we don't know about, and it's awful. And we're just about to find out that our life is just not worth living, and something's about to reveal itself that is going to take all of life's value away.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm trying to think how to describe that quality, because jump scares are easy to describe, aren't they? But that kind of hollow, sort of grimy sense of true long horror.
I almost feel like they're refashioning your attachment to meaning over the course of 2 hours. I feel like you lose attachment with what does the family mean? What does my role in society mean? What does reality itself mean? Is it made of this, this, and this? I feel like these horror films are detaching you from all the things that you kind of know, and they're reattaching you to these different uncertainties. And then you're kind of left stranded and grief-struck. It's really miserable, but it's very interesting.
But I think you've hit on something there, because I think that how about maybe the jump scares are you're afraid of something, a monster, and the existential dread kind of thing is perhaps, as you say, more of a change in reality, like more of the world not being reliable anymore.
I think the difference, the jump scare is there's something that's trying to kill you that's out there. And the existential dread fear is there's something inside me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And if you can do both of them, and I think a lot of horror films do both of them, because, if you're going to be a horror filmmaker, I think you get into it because you like all the tricks in the book of the horror genre. You want to have jump scares, and you want to have gore, and you want to have, moods and atmospheres that are just, that's why there's always like a little lullaby or children's song or baby doll, all these horror elements that just replay over and over, but it's almost part of the genre. But if you can have jump scare and existential dread, you're getting people on the outside and the in.
What is that business of as soon as you hear a lullaby with a little bit of echo on it, why is that?
Why is it so chilling?
Why is that a horror thing?
I think it's a context. It's like taking something that is so intentionally for babies and children, and you're setting it into the context of a dead body or something like that. It's just, there's an extreme distance that your psychological scope has to travel to try to have them meet, and they can't meet. And so it kind of curdles and trembles away and becomes awful. I don't know.
That
was just, I haven't thought about it too much.
No, I'm buying it. So we've solved horror.
Have you ever thought about doing anything? I think horror is like the least. I love watching horror films. It never occurs to me to write anything that I don't have a single bone of horror creativity in my body.
Bizarrely, recently I've thought I ought to practice camera work, because it's not my thing. I mean, it's not what I do anyway, but cinematography is something I feel like I ought to understand more, and particularly equipment makes me nervous. I'm worried I'll forget stuff. So I thought I ought to make something, and it did occur to me that one of the interesting things is me and my son watched Halloween a couple of nights ago, and it's a great film. It's simple, but it's all in the sound. It's all in the sound, and John Carpenter did the music. So you get the jump scares through sound, you get the atmosphere created through sound. And what's interesting, I think, is the beginning of the film. It's all in daylight. So it's not the usual monster lurking in the dark. The beginning of the film succeeds in creating a great deal of tension on wide shots, which traditionally give you a sense of space, and they're not how you create tension. You create tension usually with extreme close-ups and a wobbly camera, but they are big wide shots, broad daylight, and all that's creepy is the music. And it occurred to me, that's interesting. Maybe I can do some practice doing some sort of short daylight horror film. And so I might well do that, I think.
Do you have any idea at all what this horror film with the wide shots inspired by Halloween might be?
No, I don't know. I was thinking of using my daughter, because she's quite horrific and would make a quite horrific little girl standing, staring.
She's horrific?
Well, yeah, she's.
Damn.
Well, you've seen her. She's pretty terrifying.
Yes. I didn't want to say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'll get her to stand and be scary, and I think she'll enjoy that. I think it might be a nice exercise, and it's incredibly cheap. So, yeah, I think I might have a go at that.
Are you going to make,
I'm all talk. I might not.
You are all talk, Dan. You're not going to make a horror movie. Okay, well, let me tell you about, so you have not seen Skinamarink. Is that correct?
No, I haven't. Tell me about it.
Have you heard about it?
I've heard the name. I haven't heard more than that.
Okay, so it sort of made waves maybe a year ago. And first time I ever heard about it was because I heard that it was a very inexpensive movie. It was made for about $15,000. And it was the scariest movie that people had ever seen. So people were saying at around the time that it was kind of making the festival rounds. The other thing is that it had secretly been pirated and put on the internet. And so there was kind of this flurry of, there's this super cheap, super strange horror film that is the scariest film anybody's ever seen. And now it's online and everything like that. So it's really not the scariest movie anyone's ever seen, but it is, again, that sort of existential dread type thing. It's incredibly moody, incredibly dull, which is a strange dullness is almost a primary feature of it. It's long shots. So the filmmaker, whose name is Kyle Edward Ball, is Canadian. And Skinamarink is, I think, like a children's song. It goes by a number of different names, Skinamarink. But he basically just shot a little horror film in his own house using his younger brother and younger sister on a pretty good camera. It was like a Sony FX6. It looks like he shot it with like a Game Boy. It looks really rough. It's very glitchy, very hard to see things, but everything's creepy. So it's like there's a lot of shots of like walls and floors and rooms with like television light flickering in them. There's cartoons. And the very simple story is these two children wake up in the middle of the night and their father has disappeared. But you hardly ever see these two children. Sometimes you see a foot or like an elbow or an arm sticking out or their shadows. Very rarely see them full-faced, if at all. They don't talk much. If they do talk, it's muffled and strange. And so it's almost like a film you feel like you'd see at a museum, like at a video installation that some weird artist has made, but it sort of has crossed over into the world somehow. But I do feel like as a film, it does hold together. It is its own thing. It's worth seeing for what it is. It is dull, but it's sort of pleasantly dull. You sort of watch, and you're like, I'm still watching the same wall. You're sort of astonished that you've been looking at this plain, ugly wall with, glitchy, bad-looking footage, but sort of beautiful in its execution. And I almost feel like it can serve as an inspiration for people who do want to make their own films because he just figured out a new angle, in a way. Like he's figured out, I can do this. I can make it really cheap. He just came up with his own brilliant solution for how to make a full horror movie, almost just by rejiggering the aesthetics and not worrying about anything that anybody else worries about, like script, story, dialogue, main characters. There's none of that is there. There's not even really a villain. There's sort of this voice, and you don't know what it is. And by the end of it, I don't think anybody really ever figures out what it was about. It's almost like a childhood nightmare feeling. Like, what does it feel like, or did it feel like when you were a child and you woke up in the middle of the night and you were frightened and something seemed off and wrong? It's almost like that sort of feeling and atmosphere is just played out for 2 hours. It's like a revisitation of that old fear that I think we all must have had. I mean, maybe there's some kids that went through life just never afraid of the monster under the bed or in any whatever form.
That sounds very fascinating. And I suppose you have to have an enormous confidence and, a kind of a singularity of vision. Maybe sometimes those are the best, I think. I mean, just because it can't be articulated. I think that sometimes there can be a theme or, a meaning behind a film or a validity to it, even if you can't say what it is.
Right. Well, this guy started off by doing a YouTube channel in which he would people would send in their dreams to him and he would turn them into little films.
Wow.
And I think along the way, he realized that there was a certain potency to this kind of sound and this kind of look that wasn't like the familiar thing. And he could I think his insight and his epiphany for the film itself came from probably creating these dreams in the YouTube channel and not really caring about what he was showing people too much. Like it was probably just more fun and more like a dare. Like, I'm going to make them watch, this door slowly open for 10 minutes. But he realized the potency of these almost still images. And I always think that's when someone sort of discovers something, and I'm sure other people have done similar things, but it has the feeling when you watch it of a discovery of a unique way of doing something. Not that you want to copy it, but it's hard. I don't know.
It sounds really, really interesting. I mean, I've never heard a review that said something was dull and then I wanted to watch it, but I think I will.
I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you thought.
Yeah.
I do recommend that you watch it.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Even though you might resent it and be angry at me.
I resent it anyway. I resent everything.
You do.
I just want to say, if anyone wants to watch my play, it was on last week by the time this podcast comes out.
Oh, that's right.
So you need to time travel back a few days.
Oh, we did a bad job, didn't we?
We did a bad job. I mean, but
that's good job for me.
But
for my Putney, Vermont play.
Go and see Sean's play in Putney, Vermont, because, this is something that, again, a producer said to me, the thing about a play is you can't do a close-up. And I thought,
right.
Yeah, you can. A close-up is just big, having something big relative to the rest of the stage. So
yeah, a close-up is when the actors come to the front of the stage and they're closer, and it does feel like a close-up. It's sort of like it's a presentation of, if an actor's coming to the front of the stage, they're telling you something in a different way than if they're turned away from you or in the corner or in the back. It's like a volume level.
There's always a parallel, isn't there, in every form?
Yeah.
I think there's always a parallel. You've got to translate it for different forms, and different stagings as well. One night we're doing traverse theatre, so the audience is on two sides.
Oh, nice.
And it's proscenium arch, so the audience is just on one side. And I always think it's much more intimate, and there's a sort of much more interactive feel if it's either in the round or traverse. And there's a brilliant theatre in Manchester in England called the Royal Exchange, which is built in the Old Corn Exchange in Manchester, which is an enormous room. I think it was for a time the largest room in the world, but it's a beautiful old building with an enormous, like an aircraft hangar size room, but they've built a theatre inside that, and it looks like a moonlander or something. It's sort of glass and steel, and it's a theatre in the round, and it's terrific seeing stuff there. I've seen many productions there, but there's something about in the round productions that I really love.
I don't know if I've ever seen something in the round. Is that a fully circular theater? Or is it three quarters, or is it half, or?
Well, it can be either, I think. But yeah, the one at the Royal Exchange is fully in the round. No, when you visit, we'll go there. But it's a terrific theatre, and I mean, it presents other interesting things as well, because you can't really have that much scenery,
right?
And I like that because it makes it a lot cheaper.
Well, your play Joke seems like it's ideally suited for theatre in the round.
Yeah.
Because it is it's very low prop, and just three characters. And it just feels like the way that you can pull that off is they're facing in different directions, moving in different places. Like the whole circular space can be explored. Whereas, mine's set in a graveyard, and it feels like a front-facing type experience. Like I can't imagine people sitting in other places other than in front watching the thing.
You know what? I bet you, not to tell you your own thoughts, but I bet if you had to, you'd find a way around it and find it interesting.
No,
I think.
I bet I wouldn't.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm down for anything. I think it's because I haven't experienced it as a theater goer. It's hard for me to put it into practice because you're adding dimensions that I haven't processed. So the way that I think about theater, just in terms of my at least creative experience, it's almost cinematic. It's almost like there's a screen up there where the audience is sitting in rows and rows and rows, and they're beholding something that's before them, almost in two dimensions. So it's hard for me to move into that third dimension or cross to the side and get behind. I love the idea of it. I can't picture it quite.
I honestly think you will, and you should. In fact, I think it will suit your writing very well.
All right, well, when I do one of those, you can take credit for it.
I will. Believe me, anything you do is mine.
Is yours. Yeah. So I have to dedicate this one to you as well. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, you don't need to. I'll assume it.
So the first one was...
Don't worry, I'll dedicate it to me.
Okay. Well, so the first one was to Dan, and this one will be to Dan again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about my wife?
What about you?
What about my parents? My loving parents? When did I get dedications?
Bollocks to them. Where were they?
When you released me from this
knackers to your family.
What is it?
This is all my doing.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'm thankful still, but I'm starting to resent it a little bit.
Well, I don't think you're quite thankful enough yet.
Okay.
I think another couple of plays,
and then I'll be ready.
Successes, and we'll see.
Oh, you're just going to watch and see how they do. If they're bad, you're going to start distancing yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this one could be bad.
Yeah.
This one could be real bad. I maybe even wrote it just to cut this tie. Okay. Well, what else? What else are we to say?
I don't know. We seem to have gone on. Should we stop there?
Yeah, we could probably stop.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this classic episode of How to Make a Film. Leave us a gloriously stunning review of our podcast on iTunes, and you'll not only claim a wicked stack of Blu-ray films, but you'll also win a copy of my play, Food and Shelter, signed by Dan. Please feel free to email your questions to podcast@secretplanet.co.uk. Sign up for updates on Dan's upcoming film, Hold Excalibur, at secretplanet.co.uk. How to Make a Film was hosted by Dan Freeman and Sean Hurley. Produced by Jamie Walsh. Edited by Ethan Walsh.